Obviously, this week, two games. Begin with Northwestern. Northwestern, as we thought last time we played them, it's a really good team, old team, veteran team. As I mentioned on the radio here just recently, having as good a year as they've had really in a number of years, certainly dating back to the tournament team, which I believe they are right now. So really good team, just coming off a win last night at Wisconsin. Older veteran guards, terrific defensively, well coached, and that's obviously on Thursday, followed by obviously a terrific Michigan State team, well coached Michigan State team. So, questions?
Getting Northwestern again, the last time you played them was maybe your best game of the year.
Yeah.
When you look over that film and maybe start prepping for this game based on that, like what does it look like looking at your team and how you played in that game, and maybe seeing some things that you've struggled to replicate since?
Well, one of the negatives of doing press conferences on a Monday is we're still working on the cleanup from yesterday. So I've not really had a chance to dive into that as much, Adam, right now. We will. I do agree it was probably our best performance of the year. It was as good as we've been defensively and offensively. Certainly, they'll come with adjustments. They're a very good road team as well. But at this point, I know the staff has done some advanced scouting and looked at it. And I think, clearly there was probably a confidence that came in a game like that. That maybe some guys played with that are struggling with a little bit right now. But outside of that, I can't say a whole lot.
And when it comes to Bruce and his leadership role in this team, you had said how you asked him to be in some of the captains' meetings. I think on the broadcast they said something like there might have been a revote for captains.
There was, yeah.
Okay. How did that come about? Can you explain what that was or what that meant? I
just wanted our guys to have a say in revoting for the leadership on the team. And I just thought it was a good time to do it, and they revoted, and he got the significant a number of votes. First time we've really had a freshman do that. Typically we do it earlier in the year, and it's just once on the year. But I just think with such a new group, it was important to do it again. So
I guess when did that happen, and did it change it? Did anybody fall out?
I would certainly not share that publicly, but I don't mind you asking. But I'm not going to put our players on blast if that were to happen. So, no, it happened just a couple of days ago. Yeah.
You talked about Zed's shoulder injury on the radio show last week. You said it makes it hard for him to breathe a little bit with that compression sleeve or brace that he has to wear. How much does that affect his extension and rebounding with that shoulder?
I've not asked him that. He's just mentioned it hurts his breathing, and it probably hurts his finishing to some degree, just because you can't extend in it as much. But I don't really know that there's another alternative right now, because if he gets hit there, it protects him from having a significant injury that might require surgery. So I don't know there's a better solution to it.
And then you mentioned Gene coming off the bench a little bit more in the rotation because of his rebounding ability. How much do you think that's helped in turning this defensive rebounding around a little bit the last few games?
I don't know that I don't know that we've faced a team that is a tremendous offensive rebounding team in our last two games. So I think that's going to get more tested once we play against some of the better offensive rebounding teams. But I do think he should be able to, because he does a good job pursuing the ball, and he does have really good length.
Chris, you said you think it's the best Northwestern team since last time they were in the tournament. Last year they finished 7-13 in the conference, and then they lose what some people might say their best players, Young and Nance, and not looking like a tournament team. So based on last time you played them, are there any specific players or maybe an approach that they've changed this year that they've stepped forward despite losing those guys?
They're playing different defensively. It's a really interesting study, when you think about that. You think about it's really fascinating. It's a credit to Chris and their staff. But I think people knew that their guards were old, and that they as a team were pretty old. so people understood how old their team was. When you have, I think they have the starting point guard. I think he's going in his 4th year as a starting point guard. So people knew that but they had a 7-footer that didn't play a whole lot, that's played a really important role, kind of support role, but a really good player. I think it's just a really interesting study, and you have those 2 guys leave, and it's not an indictment on those 2 guys, but now they're having the best year they've had in some time. What makes all that, work like that? Now as I mentioned, they've changed how they play defensively. They play much more pressure defense, and they've just changed how they play, and they're very good defensively. But it's an interesting case study, it really is, in kind of team dynamics, and they've obviously got into a great rhythm here.
Trying to crunch some numbers on what's happened here in these last 10 games, and what I see is opponents are shooting for a higher percentage, and they're also taking and making more threes in a lot of these games than you guys are. I know every game's different, and there's no one size fits all, but just what can you see defensively, and maybe in terms of shooting threes that maybe you guys can tweak a little bit, I guess?
Some of that might be some of the trapping that we've done out of the post that has initiated some open threes. I think some of it's been transition. I don't know that there's a specific lesson from that, Steve, or generalization in that. I'd have to take a deep dive in it myself, other than I just think we've had too many inconsistent moments defensively, too many times where we've, yesterday they opened with 2 threes. One of them was both of them were fairly well contested. But I don't know that there's a specific element to that outside of our transition has to clean up, and our rotations out of our post traps have to get better.
When you guys get back together, obviously you're in a real difficult spot here. I mean, you're under 500 with 8 games to go. Just how do you keep this positive? What are you trying to build, I guess, down the stretch? And I don't know, what is the message when you get back together of this is why we're going to continue to pound at this rock to try and get it right?
Yeah, I think you just focus on the work, Steve. I think you focus on the work. Listen, I don't know that there's an answer outside of just focusing on the work and focusing on what we need to get better and improve in. I think if you focus our thoughts too much on what has happened or what's ahead of us or what's next, I think that can be overwhelming for everybody. I think we have to focus on the work. And there's optimism if we focus in the work that ultimately, if we show improvement, that there'll be dividends that'll be paid, and that's it. And that's going to be the message to them. There'll be some specific messages, but it's going to be based around that.
You said on the radio show, you were talking about the transfer guys and messages getting through as well as it needed to. You talked about Sean in transition and getting him more involved. I think most people look at it and you bring guys in the summer and you work with them and you have about preseason and then guys should get it. But it sounds like you're saying, especially the transfer guys, it's more complicated than that. Can you just explain a little bit maybe the difficulties that people don't see in that aspect?
I mean, I think they've gotten, for the most part, they've gotten, I think in large part the message we've won. I just think there's some specific areas relative to each player that we've challenge them with that I think they have to continue to grow in, and that's when it came up with Sean, I think we've got to figure out ways to get him more involved, and he has to figure out a way to get a few more open looks.
You talked about Tanner and how the rotation shrinks at this point in the season. I'm just curious, when you had initial conversations with him, and I know you said it's going to be a 2-year process, did it come up that he could be in this kind of role? Has that been because of other guys stepping up, the way he's played? I mean, could you just get in a little bit of what has gone on with him to the point where he doesn't even play yesterday?
No, I think it's, as I mentioned in the radio show, I think it's, your rotation is somewhat limited right now. We just can't play typically 10 or 11 guys. we feel like we've needed some help in terms of our length and our defense and our rebounding. And I think that's where Gene we've decided to give Gene a shot there.
Chris, wondering if you can point to anything specific with before the Iowa win, all those losses were close. I mean, Maryland, you had a shot to make it a single possession game down late, but afterwards, a couple tough road games, I know, but scores have started to get out of hand. I was wondering if there's any one or two specific things you can point to as to what has flipped that for you guys.
I would say the score yesterday was out of hand. I think if you're talking about Illinois and Indiana, and then the start of the Wisconsin game, I don't know there's any one thing I could point to, Timmy. I think it's perhaps there's some frustration there. I don't know if there's any one specific thing I could point to, but I think yesterday's game was kind of what some of those other games had been before that stretch, where it's a 2 or maybe a 3 possession game for the bulk of the game.
Are you going into practice with is it more about just overall performance? You mentioned just do the work, focus on getting better. Are there a couple different guys where you're looking for better offensive performances from a specific player or better defensive performances from specific players? Is it just collectively everything at this point?
Yeah, I think you're looking at more collective areas that we have to get better in. Yesterday, I thought we took too many unbalanced shots in the paint, over length and size, over wall-ups that were just, had a very small percentage of going in. And, our teams have typically not done that. We've got to get better in that specific area. I think you're really trying to focus on specific areas. You're having individual conversations and individual film sessions with guys, certainly this time of year, but it's a few collective areas that we just have to get better in.
Finish up with advocating.
You talk about the positive mindset, trying to get better. For you as a coach, this is something you haven't faced at Ohio State, being down under 500 this late. How have you dealt with this? What is your mentality going into practice?
I think, Adam asked something along that last week. I think you focus on the work, as much as possible. And then, I think for me, when I'm really committed to kind of my habits every day that allow me to be in, somewhat of a sane mental space, and be in the habits that help me be, better physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Those are typically, the things that allow you to hopefully be the best version of yourself. And I think when I don't do that, I think I can tend to be, get angry a little easier, maybe be a little bit more triggered. So I think for me, that's really what I focused on, the work, and focused on trying to do those things well.
When you look at the standard at Ohio State basketball and the NCAA tournament, you've gone every year. How frustrating is where the program is right now, at least so far this season?
I've mentioned it before. Obviously, it's disappointing, but again, we're focused on the work. We're focusing on the next opportunity we have to get better, which is tomorrow. And that's everything else. I've addressed that. It's obviously disappointed. We're working extremely hard here to be better the next time out, and that begins in practice tomorrow.